Hi, Purple Ella here and welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk about internalized ableism. This is something that I experience directed towards myself, from myself. So I wanted to have a little conversation about it to see if between us we can work out how to not discriminate against our disabled selves and how to do better at supporting and uplifting ourselves and other disabled people. So first of all, in case anybody hasn't heard the term ableism, what is ableism? Ableism is discrimination and social prejudice against people with disabilities. In ableist societies, disabled people are viewed as being less valuable. So despite the fact that everything I do, my online presence and the work that I do in real life is to try and support and uplift other disabled people, sometimes I can be pretty ableist towards myself, and I don't think that I'm alone in this. I feel like as a disabled person, some of society's prejudices that I've experienced throughout my life have kind of got into my brain and lead to me discriminating against myself. So this is something that I really want to work on this year and get better at. First of all, I want to talk about some examples of the ways in which I am ableist towards myself. That is to say that I judge myself as less than, or I judge myself based on my support needs. Here are some of the ways in which I am internally ableist towards myself. Number one, mobility aids. I'm going to make a whole video at some point about mobility aids and how I came to use them. But basically, I use a number of mobility aids depending on the situation. And this is something that I have been really ableist towards myself about. So my use of mobility aids came about after a period of being bedridden because my health condition had become more significantly disabling. And rather than leaving the house using mobility aids, I felt that it was better to stay in the house and not be seen out and about using mobility aids, which is incredibly ableist. I remember the first time I had to use a wheelchair, I was going to the doctors and I was unable to walk at the time. I was so unwell. So my husband decided to go into the doctors and ask to borrow a wheelchair, which he then used to take me in to see the doctor. And it was my local GP surgery, and I knew that there were going to be people there that I knew. And I was so mortified at the idea of being seen in a wheelchair, I guess because it made me feel less than, and it made me feel small and ridiculous, perhaps ridiculous for being in a wheelchair. Since then, I have started to use a wheelchair more regularly. I have my own wheelchair and I use it when I need to, mostly on longer days out that would involve a lot of walking. The rest of the time I use crutches, either one crutch or two crutches. I've got some smart crutches and I can use two when I'm really needing that extra level of support, and I can use one just day to day. So usually if you see me about, you would see me with one or two crutches. And the first time that I used those crutches, my brain was so unhelpful. It was telling me, people are going to look at you and think, why are you using those crutches? Like, you don't need them. What are you doing in those? Or people are going to look at you and think you're less than, or you're small, or you're stupid. And even worse than that, my brain was telling me, you don't really need those crutches. You're just not trying hard enough. And this is a common thing for us to experience from other people, that if we just tried a little bit harder, that if we just forced ourselves to get through situations, then we wouldn't need to use mobility aids, or we wouldn't need the extra support that we're saying that we need. And when it came to my own mobility aids, I was definitely telling myself that same storyline. Don't use mobility aids, Ella. Just try harder. Just push through. Just be in pain. Just accept the days in bed as a payoff for being able to be out without mobility aids. This was ridiculous and unhelpful, and I'm really working hard on accepting and embracing my mobility aids. It helps that my crutches are purple. The second way in which I'm internally ableist towards myself is believing in my own diagnoses. So I have the following diagnoses: dyspraxia, autism, and hypermobile Ehlers-danlos syndrome. I also have a chronic fatigue syndrome diagnosis. And even though I've been given these diagnoses by respected professionals in the fields of those particular conditions, and even though I attended a thorough assessment before receiving those diagnoses, there's still a little part of my brain saying, You're just doing this because you're weak. You're just finding excuses for being weak and deciding that you've got something wrong with you rather than just admitting that you're a useless human. My brain tells me, you're just doing this because you can't cope like everybody else. You should just be able to suck it up. You don't need these fancy labels to explain away your ineptitude. This is hurtful and horrible, and I don't know why my brain does this to myself. It's like I'm tearing myself down when I don't accept and embrace my diagnoses. The other way in which I'm internally ableist is by judging myself on what I can't do rather than focusing on what I can do. I do so much. As a mother, I raised 3 children. I am a wife. I am a pet owner. I do the work that I do for autistic people. I make videos. I support autistic people locally. I train teachers and teaching aides to be better, supportive educators for autistic people. I speak to audiences about my experiences so that people can understand autistic people better. I do all of these things, and yet what do I do to myself? I think, you can't go for a long walk. What's wrong with you? You should just push through. I focus on the fact that I have meltdowns. I focus on the fact that I'm anxious all the time. I call myself less than because I can't do some things, rather than realizing how incredible I am because I can do all the things that I do. The other thing that I do that's internally ableist is that I try and hide my diagnoses, particularly, I've got to be honest, the fact that I'm autistic. I don't mean that I consciously try and hide that I'm autistic. I don't do that. Everybody knows that I'm autistic. I'm pretty out there with it. By that I mean I pretend to be neurotypical. I don't stim when I need to stim publicly. I feel embarrassed getting my fidget toys out or my earplugs when I need them when things are too loud. I feel embarrassed when I'm anxious, and so I don't tell people that I'm feeling anxious and that I need support. Instead, I try and suck it up, and things just get worse and worse. I'm not honest about my support needs with everybody. I will keep going long after I'm feeling exhausted and overwhelmed. I'll keep the mask on and I'll keep pretending to be okay to make the people that are with me feel more comfortable, rather than admitting that I'm struggling, rather than admitting that I need support. Can you relate to any of this? It's so hard. I feel like sometimes I'm my own worst enemy. I ask the world to be accepting and supportive of people who are disabled, and yet this is what I do to myself. I tear myself down because of the things that I can't do, rather than boosting myself up. I don't ask for support when I need it. I don't admit when I need to go home and rest. These are all the ways in which I'm internally ableist. So what can I do? How can I get better at this? How can I support myself better? Because I feel like unless I'm supporting myself fully and I'm not doing these unhealthy things, I can't fully support the other people that I work with, because I know that I need to change this pattern because it's not good for me. So what can I do? I can notice when I'm being ableist towards myself, and I can change that. I can change that script. So this weekend I had a meltdown. I had a really big meltdown, and it felt bad. And I sat on the floor and I cried, and I thought to myself, you're useless, you're rubbish, why can't you cope like everybody else? Instead of doing that, I could think, you've had a meltdown. That is a result of the fact that you're autistic. That's something that you couldn't help. Now, look at how well you did, because after the meltdown, you got back up again and you carried on parenting and you carried on doing what you needed to do to support your family. I need to change that dialogue. When I'm looking at where I'm failing, I need to look at where I'm succeeding instead. By giving myself the same compassion that I give to everybody else. I'm incredibly compassionate towards other disabled people. I never look at other disabled people and think, why are you using that mobility aid? Why do you need rest? Why do you need to cancel this? I never do that. I always try and just believe a person's situation from what they're telling me and support them in the way that they tell me that they need to be supported. Why aren't I giving myself the same level of respect? It's time that I treated myself as I treat other people. By accepting and embracing my support needs and aiming to be authentic and not hide my disabilities. So when I'm out there with my crutch, because I need my crutch, because it helps me, I shouldn't feel ashamed or embarrassed. I shouldn't think, oh, I won't use my crutch on this occasion because people will be looking at me and judging me. I should just use it. If I need to be in my wheelchair, I need to be in my wheelchair. If I need to be under a weighted blanket because I've had a meltdown and I can't handle socialising that day, I need to own that, and I need to say to people, I'm really sorry, I know I was supposed to be doing this thing, but I need to be at home under my weighted blanket because that's what I need to do. By stimming publicly, yesterday at church, I needed to stim. I felt that I needed to stim, so I stimmed. And I did what I needed to do, and I felt so good about that. And yeah, people might have been looking at me, and yeah, people might be judging me, but that doesn't matter. I was authentic to myself, and that felt good. By stopping tearing myself down because of the areas that I have difficulty, and by being proud of who I am, I can fight my own internalized ableism, and you can too. I hope you found this video useful. If you have, do consider subscribing to my channel. Also, I'm planning on doing a live stream about once a month, so if you hit that notification bell, it'll let you know when I go live. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week. Bye bye.